Today is the second day of the July 88 7-day retreat. At the beginning of each retreat, in the opening talk or the first talk of the first day, we always say something about walking quietly, so as not to disturb each other, to disturb the silence. And bringing questions into meetings if there are questions. And two things have come up about that. Sometimes people who are new here reporting that they feel bad about almost any sound they make. Feeling bad about taking an audible breath, or in walking a joint creaking. And also, this doesn't just refer to people who are new here, it is such an ancient pattern, feeling some anxiety about coming into the meeting room, anxiety about what to say or to say it right, anxiety about there being an expectation of what a person should say or shouldn't say, how one should be, maybe spontaneous, whatever that means. Doing something to be approved of, being afraid of doing, saying something that may be disapproved of. It would be easy to say, can you drop that? It's not easily dropped, because this is wired into us. The compulsion to be good, to do right, to get approval or praise, and the fear of doing wrong, of punishment of some sort or other, of getting hurt in the process, and so forth. But I will say it anyways. There is no way in which one should be here, other than can there be an increasing awareness, maybe a deepening awareness of how one is, without berating oneself, without judging oneself or others, without expecting oneself to be in a certain way, because that immediately impedes, hinders the perception of what's there. There cannot be a clear and open, uninfluenced perception if there's expectation of how I ought to behave. Then that is the important thing. That has the value. And that colors the perception. So as one walks, during walking or comes into the room to find the mat, as one opens or closes doors, enters bathrooms or bedrooms. Can there be attention just about all the sounds, not just the sounds of the closing and opening of doors or the footsteps, but also the birds? This gentlest of breezes today, sometimes there's a roaring storm, with the tree trunks creaking, much louder than the ankle joint as one's walking. Can there be an awareness, a gentle awareness of this? Gentle meaning not with any harsh standards, no standards, just listening. And with that listening, inevitably, an increasing sensitivity to sound. When there's some 40 or 50 people sitting together quietly, there is a silence that communicates itself, and that makes for sensitivity to sounds. Any sounds, inside or out, mine or yours, it doesn't matter. And in that silent, quiet sensitivity, the footsteps or the way a door is handled or a dish is picked up adjusts itself. If one is sensitively aware of a beautiful garden, lovely flowers and plants and grasses, one sees it and smells the fragrance. And the beauty of the wind through the grasses and leaves, then the footsteps will also be tender. One will not step on the plants or flowers, because they're seen, they're there. It doesn't come out of an adopted code. I should not step on these flowers because this is what the rule of the garden is. If it does, then our footsteps will be very rigid and will miss. Because every time we impose codes upon ourselves and exert willpower to follow these codes, there is a simultaneous resistance to doing that, a rebellion. Willpower inevitably goes hand in hand with resistance. And both come out of imposed, self-imposed or other imposed standards. But looking and listening at where one is walking, open, porous to the sounds of silence, there will be quieter walking. Which needs no code, it needs no rules. It comes on its own when sensitivity increases. Yet the moment a problem comes up, an anger about something, fear of something, anxiety of transgressing rules, or concern about other people who are not following the rules, and the annoyance at that moment we bump into things quite noisily. And just to hear that, when there's no attention, there's a much greater likelihood of dropping something or making a louder noise, which is neither good nor bad. It doesn't need any praise or punishment, fault-finding or excuses. It's happened. A dish has been dropped. If we begin to engage in self-deprecation or regrets, guilt, then the next dish is liable to drop too. Because the mind isn't there. It's enclosed in the closet of guilt or fault-finding, fear of someone not approving of me, or anger at somebody for being so insensitive. One can observe that, how these sequences happen. I remember, it just comes to mind, a flashback, being in the kitchen and scolding our son for something, and the next moment banging with my head into an open cabinet door. When we're utterly absorbed and concerned with how other people should behave and shouldn't be behaving, there is not this gentleness of attention to how we ourselves are acting this moment. So, can it also be mentioned again that sitting in the meeting room and the next person coming in, there is no expectation of what a person should look like, act like, step up like, or close the door like, sit down like. We may have been, some of us or most of us may have been through trainings where we were told that this is of great importance to the person sitting in the meeting room, to watch with what attentiveness the person enters. I don't think in those terms at all. I'm glad to see you. It's nice meeting again, talking over something together which is of common concern. It may start on a personal note, but one can go much deeper than the personal one. One can go to the depth of what concerns all of us, including the person who is already sitting in the meeting room for some reason or other. It could be somebody else too. So saying that, will that drop the anxiety of sitting in the waiting line? We don't call it that. We thought if we don't call it a waiting line, it would help. But this doesn't help very much. The anxiety is there because we are wired to be anxious before seeing somebody who is maybe not even consciously thought of as being in some kind of position of authority. But these interconnections in the brain cells happen due to past experiences. And this has some reminiscence, a closed door and oneself in front of it. Maybe like a doctor's office, one doesn't know what the doctor is going to diagnose. There's anxiety, he may give one an injection, one is afraid of needles. Or the principal's office, if one has grown up in a school where one may have had to go to the principal's office. All kinds of possible associations are instantaneously triggered when there is no depth of awareness. So there's anxiety, because it's connected with the associations. So it has been triggered, there is this feeling. Can one sit with that feeling of, don't call it anxiety, we're just calling it this way now because we're talking with each other. But as one sits there, maybe the dis-ease in the solar plexus or stomach or the intestines rumbling. Maybe a change in breathing or heartbeat. Maybe feeling blood rushing to the head or whatever the senses being affected. Just paying attention to that as to the birds chirping on the tree. And not make a problem out of it. It's happened. Just like the dish crashing, it's happened. We're wired that way. But it doesn't have to continue. Which means it doesn't have to generate thoughts, oh, how awful. It shouldn't be. I wish it would be over with. I have to conquer it. Because these thoughts, which are in conflict with the present state of, we just described it, solar plexus, stomach, intestines, muscles, tension. Any thoughts that are in conflict with that state cause more physical symptoms. And these symptoms cause more thoughts, I wish I was feeling different. I hate this state. I won't go to meeting next time, or something like that. People usually don't stay away from meetings for this reason. I've never heard about this before. Just using it as an example. So, the first rush of bodily symptoms has been triggered. Maybe one time one catches the thought or the memory. It flashes through the mind, and there the connection is seen. So, the symptom is there. Can it be allowed to be there like the breeze in the leaves? Listening with the same ears, with the same attention to inside and out without interference. Not new thoughts about it, because it's what it is. It needs no attitude toward it. It needs no reaction. And if one really attends to it, listens to it, then the energy is there. And there's no room for thinking about it. When the energy of awareness is there in the midst of an uncomfortable stomach or solar plexus or heartbeat. The awareness not separate from that state. No escape from it. No separation from it, and yet no wallowing in it either. Then there's no room for thought about it, which will create new symptoms. If there is no thought about it, there will be more physical manifestation, which is what it is. In coming into the meeting room, we can either talk about that if you wish to look at that superficially as well as in depth, or maybe there's another question that one wishes to bring up, and let the stomach gurgle and the heart pound. is not incapacitating. It will abate. One will not even realize it's gone because something new is there. Does that make sense? For us in the meeting room to really meet, the easiest is if you have no image of me and I have none of you. Because then there is a direct relationship. But for that to happen, there has to be awareness, whether they're images or not. One cannot assume I have no image of you or you have no image of me. One has to be open to that, see it, and not take the image for reality. Image is formed from past memory, and that memory may not be accurate at all. Because what is remembered from meeting a person in the past may also be an image of that person. One didn't meet that person in the past either, and the image of that person was committed to memory, was registered. So can one be leery of memories about each other? What we usually do is that's what we rely upon, and therefore don't see each other now. The only reliable thing is to see each other now, not what we remember about each other. That may be completely false. And yet that's what we carry around. That's what we think about when we think about that person. The image of the last time or the last 10, 20 or 100 times. How absurd, isn't it? And that very memory preventing a new meeting of two people who start freshly. Please don't hear these words as though it was said, you must not have an image of the other person or of yourself. Very often, being so conditioned in, I must not, this is right and this is wrong, being so conditioned to think in opposites all the time, we're incapable of listening correctly. So often I'm told, you said I shouldn't, or I should not, or I should. That's not what's said. And if I say it, please bring it to my attention so that we can correct it. I'm also conditioned in that way. All we're saying is, can one be ever more and ever deeply aware of the images of oneself and each other? And how one takes them for the truth, and how they hinder relationship, direct relationship. How they become the focus of our hurts and good feelings, depending on whether the image is flattered or stroked, praised, made up to or approved of, or whether it is criticized, talked badly about, hurt, called a name. So not only do images prevent our free relationship, our fresh relationship with each other, but they are the cause of almost all of our hurts, depressions, pains and sufferings, psychologically, or our feeling boosts, elation, positive energy, as it is called, if we're told how good we are. The person who says that may be manipulating us, because it's well known to all of us how we gravitate toward people who think we're terrific, good, wonderful, this or that, positive. So we gravitate toward people like this and want to hear more, want to be in that person's presence because it feels so good. The energies get a boost. It is an addiction. And therefore can be used to manipulate each other. It's very well known, and yet we fall prey to it all the time. Likewise, we avoid people who hurt our image, give us pain, depression, feeling bad about ourselves. And in avoiding that person, building up more images about that person. Because the possibility for verification, for direct contact and a fresh meeting, which means the breakdown of the old images, that possibility is not there when we avoid each other. And it seems almost inevitable. Not having seen someone for a long time, maybe not out of avoidance, just by sheer distance, one hasn't been together, one has a more and more solid image of that person, based on past experiences or speculations. The brain is playing around a lot, speculating. What has happened to this person? Why hasn't he or she written to me or been in touch with me? And beginning to spin a web of imagery, which is unverifiably, unless we meet face to face, aware how images come up and aware that they're not the truth. And then maybe listening in an entirely new way. Not that the images have been wiped out or destroyed. They are understood for what they are, namely images. In a retreat recently, I don't know where it was, it doesn't matter, I mentioned something about what these images may really be inside the brain, and a lot of people found that very helpful, so I will say it again. I had read in a book by a very respected author who happens to be a theoretical physicist that very likely the images in the brain are of the character of a hologram. Because I've often wondered, maybe you have wondered too, what screen are these pictures projected on? What's going on? Because in thinking right now of maybe the house one lives in, here it is, right? There it is. You can look at it. It's a little fuzzy. Thinking of your best friend or your child if you have one. There it is. You can see it. Can you? There's a picture. So I don't know whether this is, to what extent this is researched, but the suggestion is that the picture appearing within the brain is of the nature of a hologram. And maybe you have never seen a hologram. I hadn't myself until years ago. Someone came to our house, an artist who was very interested in holograms and laser machines. And he had built himself a little laser beam machine and put that on a chair. We darkened the room. It was already pretty dark. And then he showed us a piece of glass. He says, that's where the hologram is on. It's like a glass plate. You didn't see a thing. And then he turned this little laser beam machine on, and the brightest beam of light that you've ever seen came from that machine. So bright that the dust in the room, which usually shows up when you project a movie, seemed to be 1,000-fold, which was amazing and marvelous in itself. So much dust and so beautiful. Like shining silver. And this random dance of all of these particles. Quietly. But even more amazing was, as he held this little glass plate into that beam, there appeared beyond it, someplace in space, a little frog. A three-dimensional frog. Almost as true as life. And you put your hand through it, and the hand went through nothing. There was nothing there. And yet there was this little three-dimensional frog, looking very much alive. Another interesting fact about this glass plate that he told us, he didn't do it, but he told us he could break this glass plate into many fragments and just hold up one fragment into the laser beam, and there would be that same frog. So, having seen that realistic image, and having heard that maybe this is the nature of these images that are produced in the brain from memory, makes a lot of sense how real they seem. How true. And the fact that an activated memory, an image that is heard, connects immediately with the whole physical organism, produces the same pains or tensions as if one was hit by an actual physical object, makes it appear that much more real. And yet the reality that the image that we carry about ourselves, or the whole accumulation of images that we call ourselves, their reality is the reality of a hologram, the reality of something that has no substance whatsoever. It's nothing except an image, based on questionably remembered facts, facts which may have never been properly seen. Well, we'll talk about self-image more as the retreat goes on. It's just sort of getting acquainted again with it and bringing it up many times freshly from new angles. Then there is such likelihood of seeing it in oneself and being amazed at what it is, what that one has taken for so real, so dangerous, or so valuable, so precious. To see it's an image. And what is one when one has no image? When this is seen to be image, what is one then? One can't say. But if somebody called one a bad name, there would be nothing that would hurt. One would hear the name calling as one hears the wind in the trees. And maybe wonder what the person's up to, why the person feels like saying that. And one may inquire, not withdraw or attack, but inquire. Not to make an ideal out of this. She says this is what we should attain in this retreat or so. She didn't say that. So can one observe as one sits, walks, interacts, maybe at work, in the kitchen, standing in the line, sitting next to one, waiting for the soup, or as memories come up during sitting, can one observe one's deep attachment to self-image? Not say it shouldn't be there, but observe it, be aware of it. Fearing for it for dear life. Imagining that that is one's life, the continuation of this image with its expectations and hopes and fears. And questioning whether this is being alive. It is, we talked in the beginning of the retreat about it's being all right to read, but that the most important collected volumes is the volumes of one's own life. To see the attachment to the story of our life collected in volumes and volumes of memories, full of illustrations and explanations and diagrams. And being caught up in it right now, the story of one's life, and the fear that it may not continue, and the hope and desire that it would continue forever. The story of the accumulation of images about me and all that I'm identified with. My family, my loved ones, my this, my that, my possessions, my ideas, my theories, my opinions, my knowledge, my country, my religion, my teachers, and so forth. My talents, my books that I've written or will write. This tremendous identification with a story, with a continuation of holograms, which if you put your hand through, there's nothing there. It's really nothing. Albeit it's connected with every emotion and physical sensation that this organism is capable of. Which I think is the thing that makes the image appear to be so real, so alive. Because it hurts and it elates. It depresses and it inflates. Feels like $1 million or like you know what. You may say, well, if all of these images are nothing, then what is there? Is one talking out of that state? Or is that just theory? If there's nothing, then what is there? Find out. Without projecting another image. We will end here for today.